The world had shrunk to the size of a room with beige walls, the persistent, antiseptic scent of lemons and something else, something sterile, and the low, rhythmic beep of a machine that had, for months, been the drumbeat to Elara's life. Now the beeping was gone, replaced by the profound, almost deafening silence of her own apartment. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, her fingers resting lightly on the cool glass, looking down at the city that had continued to spin, unheeding, while hers had ground to a halt. Seattle was a living entity below her. The Puget Sound was a sheet of hammered silver under a sky streaked with peach and violet from the setting sun. Cars streamed like glowing embers along the Alaskan Way Viaduct, and the Great Wheel was a slow-turning constellation of light. It was all movement, energy, a symphony of life she had been a part of, once, before the diagnosis, before the aggressive rounds of treatment that had stripped her of her strength, her hair, and nearly, her will. Acute myeloid leukemia. The words still tasted like iron and fear. "You're staring again." A gentle voice came from behind her. Elara didn't turn. "It's like watching a movie I used to star in. Now I'm just in the audience." Her brother Leo came to stand beside her. He was 10 years her senior, and since their parents had passed, his protectiveness had morphed from endearing to smothering. The illness had turned it into a full-time occupation. "You'll be back in it soon," he said, his tone the careful, calibrated one he used when he was trying to sound optimistic without making promises. "The doctor said your numbers are great. You just need to rebuild your strength. Slowly." "Slowly," Elara repeated, the word ash in her mouth. Slow felt like a betrayal. She had fought so hard to live, and now that she had the chance, she was expected to do it in cautious, measured steps, as if life were a minefield, which she supposed her body had become. She turned from the window, her gaze falling on the leather-bound journal Leo had given her as a recovery gift. It was meant for logging her vitals, her food intake, her mood. She picked it up, its weight feeling insignificant in her hands. Then, with a sudden, decisive movement, she opened it to the first page. She took a pen from the coffee table, its click echoing in the quiet room. "What are you doing?" Leo asked, a note of curiosity in his voice. "I'm making a list," she said, her pen hovering over the pristine page. "Not a list of symptoms or medications. A bucket list." Leo's posture stiffened. "Elara, that's a morbid term. You're in remission. You're getting better." "Exactly," she said, her voice gaining a strength it hadn't possessed in months. "This isn't a before I die list. It's a because I'm alive list. A list of everything this city has to offer that isn't these four walls." She began to write, her script neat but determined. 1. Eat a hot dog from a street cart at 2 a.m. 2. Get caught in the rain at Pike Place Market and not worry about getting sick. 3. Dance to a busker's music until I'm out of breath. 4. Ride the ferry to Bainbridge and back just for the view. 5. Climb the water tower in Volunteer Park and see the whole city laid out before me. Leo read over her shoulder, his frown deepening with each item. A street cart? Elara, your immune system is still compromised. The rain? You know what Dr. Evans said about avoiding chills. And the water tower? Are you insane? The stairs alone. That's the point, Leo, she interrupted, her eyes flashing with a fire he hadn't seen in over a year. The point is to feel the rain, to be out of breath from dancing, not from climbing the stairs to my bathroom. The point is to live, not just to be not dead. She saw the panic in his eyes, the same panic that had been there the day of her diagnosis. He was a strategist, a problem solver by nature, a successful architect who controlled chaos for a living. Her illness was a chaos he couldn't control, and her recovery was his new project. This list was a deviation from the blueprint. I can't let you do this alone, he said, his voice tight. I'm not asking for your permission, Elara replied, her tone softer but no less firm. I'm telling you, I need this. They stood in a stalemate, the unspoken history of her fragility hanging between them. Finally, Leo let out a long, weary breath. The breath of a man conceding a battle to win the war. Fine, he said. But you're not doing it alone. 2 days later, Leo was back, and he wasn't alone. The man with him seemed to bring the outside air in with him. A faint scent of fresh coffee, petrol, and something crisp and clean. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a well-worn leather jacket and jeans. His face was open and friendly, with laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he spent more time smiling than frowning. This, Elara thought with a sinking feeling, was Leo's solution. "Elara, this is Ben," Leo announced, a note of triumph in his voice. "My best friend. Ben, this is my sister." Ben's smile was immediate and genuine. "It's great to finally meet you, Elara. Leo talks about you constantly." His voice was warm, a low baritone that was easy on the ears. Elara offered a small, tight smile. "It's nice to meet you," she said, her tone polite but distant. She knew who Ben was. Leo's adventurous, thrill-seeking friend from college who had become a paramedic. The juxtaposition had always baffled her. Leo, who planned his grocery lists, and Ben, who according to Leo's stories had gone skydiving on a whim and once backpacked across South America with nothing but a change of clothes and a first aid kit. "Ben is uniquely qualified to help you with your list," Leo began, choosing his words carefully. "He's a paramedic. He knows first aid, CPR, he can assess a situation for risks, and he knows the city inside and out. He'll be your guide." Elara's heart sank. A guide? A babysitter? A medically trained chaperone to ensure her adventures stayed within the strict boundaries of safety. She looked from Leo's hopeful, worried face to Ben's calm, observant one. She saw no pity in Ben's eyes, only a quiet, assessing curiosity. It was the lack of pity that made her hesitate to refuse outright. "So you're my adventure nanny?" she asked, her voice laced with a sarcasm she hadn't known she still possessed. Ben chuckled, a rich, unoffended sound. "Think of me as a facilitator of controlled chaos. I hear you have a list. I'm pretty good at lists." He pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. He'd already typed out her items, and next to them were notes. Next to eat a hot dog from a street cart, he'd written, "Stands on 3rd and Pine. Cleanest grill in the city. Know the owner. Next to climb the water tower, 107 steps. Resting spots at 40 and 75. I'll carry water." He had done his homework. He hadn't dismissed her list, he had analyzed it. It was infuriatingly competent. "Leo," Elara said, turning to her brother. "Can you give us a minute?" Leo looked reluctant but nodded, retreating to the kitchen. Once he was gone, Elara crossed her arms, facing Ben. "Look, I appreciate this. And I appreciate that Leo is worried. But this list, it's for me. It's about me being independent again. Having my brother's best friend shadowing my every move kind of defeats the purpose." Ben leaned against the doorframe, his posture relaxed. "I get that. I do. And for what it's worth, I told Leo this was a bad idea." That surprised her. "You did?" "Yeah. I said a grown woman, especially one who has been through what you have, doesn't need a minder. But he's your brother. He's terrified of losing you. He can't lock you in a tower, so he did the next best thing. He hired a dragon who happens to have a stock trauma kit." He gave her a lopsided grin. "My proposal is this: give me one item. Let me take you to do one thing on your list. If you hate it, if you feel babied or stifled, I'll tell Leo it's not working and bow out gracefully. No hard feelings." Elara studied him. He was being straightforward. He wasn't trying to manipulate her with guilt or fear. He was offering a trial run. And a small, treacherous part of her was relieved. The city, which had once been her playground, now seemed vast and intimidating. The thought of facing it completely alone was thrilling, but also terrifying. "One item," she agreed slowly. "Which one?" he asked. She looked out the window, where a soft drizzle was beginning to fall. Number 2. Pike Place Market on a drizzly Tuesday afternoon was a sensory avalanche. The salty, briny smell of the fishmongers, the sweet perfume of ripe fruit from the stalls, the vibrant colors of bouquets of flowers, the cacophony of vendors calling out and tourists chattering. It was life condensed and amplified. Elara stood at the entrance, feeling overwhelmed. Her hand instinctively went to the beanie covering her head. a nervous habit she'd developed. Her new hair was growing back, a soft, dark fuzz, but she still felt exposed without it. Ben stood beside her, a quiet, steady presence. He hadn't tried to take her arm or guide her. He simply waited. "Okay?" he asked, his voice low. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the damp, fragrant air. "Okay." They walked into the throng. Ben stayed a half step behind, letting her set the pace. She stopped to watch the fishmongers toss a giant salmon, the silvery arc of it through the air making her laugh in genuine delight. She ran her fingers over the cold, smooth skin of eggplants and the fuzzy skin of peaches. She listened to a group of jazz musicians, their music lively and soulful, and for a moment she forgot about the list, about her illness, about the man following her. She was just a woman in a market. And then, as if on cue, the drizzle turned into a steady, soaking rain. People shrieked and scrambled for cover under awnings, pulling up hoods and opening umbrellas. Elara froze, her body tensing with years of conditioning. "Get inside. Stay dry. Avoid germs. Don't get a chill." She turned to look for Ben, expecting to see him pulling a compact umbrella from his jacket, ready to usher her to shelter. But he wasn't. He was just standing there, his face tilted up to the sky, his eyes closed, a small, serene smile on his face as the rain darkened his hair and dripped down his temples. He opened his eyes and caught her looking. "Item number 2, he said softly. "Get caught in the rain at Pike Place Market and not worry about getting sick." The words were a permission slip. Elara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She slowly pulled the beanie from her head, stuffing it into her pocket. The rain felt cold and startling on her scalp, 1,000 tiny, pinprick sensations. It dripped down her face, mingling with the tears she hadn't realized were there. She wasn't sad. She was free. For the first time in over a year, she was just a body in the world, feeling the elements, not fighting them. She laughed, a watery, joyous sound, and spread her arms wide, turning a slow circle in the rain-slicked cobblestone street. When she stopped, Ben was watching her, his expression unreadable. There was no medical assessment in his gaze, no brotherly concern. There was only a deep, profound appreciation, as if he were witnessing something rare and beautiful. "You're not like Leo said you were," he said, his voice barely audible over the drumming of the rain. "How did he say I was?" she asked, wiping water from her face. "Fragile. Breakable." "And what am I?" she asked, challenging him. He took a step closer, his gaze intense. "You're a force of nature, Elara." The illness was just the calm before the storm. They stood there, drenched to the skin, as the market bustled around them, a blur of color and sound. And in that moment, the dynamic shifted. He was no longer her keeper. He was her accomplice. The ferry cut through the choppy, gray water of the Sound, its horn a deep, mournful sound that seemed to resonate in Elara's bones. She stood at the railing, the wind whipping her short hair, the spray from the bow misting her face. Ben stood beside her, his hands shoved in the pockets of his jacket, saying nothing. He had a gift for silence, for knowing when words were unnecessary. They had fallen into a rhythm over the past 2 weeks. Ben would text her a time and a meeting place, and she would be there, a little thrill of anticipation humming under her skin. They had crossed off eat a hot dog from a street cart. It was the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted, eaten under the neon glow of a city night, the mustard dribbling down her chin. They had crossed off dance to a busker's music. He'd pulled her into an impromptu jig in front of a saxophonist playing a soulful blues tune, and she'd been breathless and laughing, her hand warm in his. Leo was cautiously optimistic. She was eating better, she had color in her cheeks, and the shadows under her eyes were receding. He saw the physical improvement and credited Ben's steadying influence. He didn't see the late-night conversations, the way Ben listened when she talked about the fear, the loneliness of her sickness. He didn't see the way Ben's stories of his work, the tragedies and the small, hard-won miracles, made her feel grounded, connected to the messy, painful, beautiful reality of being human. "What's next on the list?" Ben asked, his voice pulled away by the wind. "The water tower," she said, her eyes fixed on the Seattle skyline, growing smaller in the distance. "That's the big one." He nodded slowly. It is. It's a lot of stairs. How are you feeling? Honestly. She considered the question. Stronger. Every day. But also impatient. I feel like I've been given a second chance, and I'm wasting it being careful. Living isn't wasting it, Elara, he said gently. Even the quiet moments. She turned to look at him. Is that why you became a paramedic? For the quiet moments. He smiled a little sadly. No. I became a paramedic for the loud ones. The moments when everything is chaos and panic. And you have to be the calm in the center of it. It makes you feel alive. Really, truly alive. In a way that bungee jumping or skydiving never could. He paused. It also reminds you how fragile it all is. How a single moment can change everything. Their eyes met, and an understanding passed between them. They were both students of life's fragility, though they had learned from different textbooks. The return trip was quieter. The easy camaraderie was still there, but it was underscored by a new tension. A awareness. When his arm brushed against hers as they walked back to his car, a jolt, warm and electric, went through her. She saw him glance at her, and she knew he'd felt it too. The conflict arrived, as it always did, from the most predictable source. Leo had come over for dinner, a ritual he insisted on to check her vitals, which really meant to assuage his own anxiety. Elara was feeling buoyant, full of the confidence her outings with Ben had given her. Ben and I are climbing the water tower in Volunteer Park tomorrow, she announced as she served him a plate of pasta. Leo's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Absolutely not. The finality in his voice was like a door slamming shut. Excuse me. The water tower, Elara? Do you have any idea how strenuous that is? The altitude change, the exertion. It's out of the question. I'm surprised Ben even agreed to it. Ben doesn't agree to things, Leo. He's not my warden. He's my friend. And he knows I can handle it. He's not thinking clearly. Leo snapped, putting his fork down with a clatter. He's getting caught up in your recklessness. I asked him to keep you safe, not to enable you to have a relapse. A relapse? Elara's voice rose, the old anger bubbling up. This isn't about a relapse, Leo. This is about you being a control freak. You couldn't control the cancer, so now you're trying to control my recovery. That's not fair, he said, his face pale. I almost lost you. Do you have any idea what that was like? Watching you fade away in that hospital bed? I will not stand by and watch you risk everything you fought for on some sentimental quest. It's not sentimental. It's essential, she cried, tears of frustration springing to her eyes. You want me to be safe in a sterile bubble, but that's not living. That's just existing. And I've had enough of that to last a lifetime. So, what, you're going to throw caution to the wind? With Ben? My irresponsible, adrenaline junkie friend who thinks a good time is rappelling down a cliff face. Leo's voice was dripping with scorn. I thought he'd be the responsible one. I was a fool. I see the way he looks at you. He's not being objective. The air went out of the room. Elara stared at her brother, her heart hammering against her ribs. What is that supposed to mean? It means he's compromised, Leo said, his voice cold. He's not there as a paramedic anymore. He's there as a man, and a man infatuated is not a man who makes rational decisions about safety. This ends now, Elara. I'm calling him. The list is over. If you do this, Leo, she said, her voice trembling but clear, you will lose me. Not to cancer, but to your own fear. I will walk out that door, and I won't look back. They stared at each other across the table, a chasm of fear and love and misunderstanding opening between them. Without another word, Leo stood up, grabbed his coat, and left. The slam of the door was the sound of their stalemate breaking. Ben found her on the bench at Kerry Park, the one with the perfect, postcard view of the Space Needle and the glittering downtown skyline. She was sitting perfectly still, her shoulders slumped. He sat down beside her, not speaking, just offering his presence. He fired you, didn't he? She said, her voice hollow. He called. He used words like boundaries, irresponsible, and betrayal of trust, Ben said quietly. He's scared Elara. I know he is, she whispered. But his fear is a cage. And I can't live in it anymore. She turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. He said you were compromised. That you weren't objective because of the way you look at me. Ben didn't flinch or look away. He held her gaze, his own serious and unwavering. He's right. Elara's breath hitched. I am compromised, he continued. Completely. From the moment I saw you standing in the rain at the market, turning in circles like you were reclaiming the very ground beneath your feet. My objectivity went out the window. I don't look at you as a patient, or as my best friend's fragile sister. I look at you as the most courageous, vibrant person I've ever met. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a tear from her cheek. So yes, he's right. I'm not here as your paramedic. I'm here as the man who is falling in love with you. The words hung in the cool night air, simple and devastatingly true. Elara felt something inside her. A wall she hadn't known she'd built, crumbled to dust. What do we do? She asked. That's up to you, he said. I won't go against your brother's wishes if it causes you more pain. But I also won't walk away from you if you ask me to stay. She looked out at the city, at the thousands of lights, each one a story, a life. Her list was more than just a series of tasks. It was a map back to herself. And Ben had been the one holding the map, guiding her not with caution, but with belief. The list isn't finished, she said, her voice firm now. There's one item left. He smiled, a slow, relieved smile that reached his eyes. The water tower. The water tower, she confirmed. Tomorrow. With or without Leo's permission. The spiral staircase inside the old brick water tower was cool and echoed with their footsteps. It was just after dawn, the city still quiet, the light filtering through the narrow windows in soft, golden shafts. 2021-22. Elara counted the steps under her breath, her hand on the cold iron railing. Her legs burned, a familiar, deep fatigue beginning to set in. But it was different now. It was the burn of effort, of use, not the debilitating weakness of illness. Ben was behind her, a silent, supportive presence. Take your time, he said softly. We have all morning. She pushed on. At the 40-step landing she paused, her breath coming in shallow pants. For a terrifying second the old fear gripped her. What if I can't do this? What if my body fails me? What if Leo was right? She felt Ben's hand warm and steady on the small of her back. No words. Just a simple grounding touch. It was enough. She started climbing again. 75, 76, 77. The air grew cooler. Her heart was a drum in her chest, a strong, steady rhythm that spoke of life, not decay. She wasn't fighting her body now, she was working with it. They were a team again. 107. She pushed open the heavy door at the top and stepped out onto the observation deck. The breath left her lungs in a soft gasp. The entire city was laid out before her, from the snow-capped majesty of Mount Rainier to the east, to the shimmering expanse of the Sound to the west. The morning sun bathed everything in a pure, clean light. The buildings were not obstacles, but a testament to human endeavor. The streets were not threats but arteries of life. She could see the ferry she'd ridden with Ben, a tiny white speck on the water. She could see the roof of Pike Place Market. She had done it. She had climbed from the depths of her sickness to this pinnacle, and she was seeing her life, her city, with new eyes. Ben came to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. She began, but words failed her. I know, he said. She turned to him, the wind tugging at her clothes. Thank you, she said. Not for being my guide. For believing I could be the guide myself. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. His eyes searched hers, asking a silent question. In answer, she rose on her toes and kissed him. It was not a desperate kiss or a fearful one. It was a kiss of celebration. A kiss filled with the taste of the city's air, and the promise of 1,000 more mornings like this one. It was a beginning. She went to Leo's office alone. He was at his drafting table, but he wasn't working. He was just staring at a blank sheet of paper. He looked up when she entered, his face a mask of apprehension and regret. "I climbed the water tower this morning," she said, her voice calm. He closed his eyes, a pained expression crossing his face. When he opened them, they were filled with a weary acceptance. And I'm fine. More than fine." She walked over to his desk and placed her journal, open to the bucket list, in front of him. Every item was crossed off, with a small note or a date next to it. He looked down at it, then back at her. He saw the difference immediately. It wasn't just in her physicality, it was in her posture, in the calm certainty in her eyes. The ghost of the sick woman was gone. In her place was a woman, whole and complete. "I was wrong," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I was so afraid of losing you that I was already treating you like you were gone. I'm sorry, Elara." She reached out and took his hand. "I know you were. And I love you for it. But I need you to love the woman I am now, not just protect the memory of the girl I was." "And Ben?" he asked, his voice tight. "Ben sees the woman I am now," she said simply. "And I love him for it." Leo was silent for a long moment, absorbing this. The final piece of the puzzle. He looked at his sister's hand in his, then out the window at the city he had helped build. He finally nodded, a single, decisive dip of his head. "Okay," he said. "Okay." It wasn't a full endorsement, but it was a start. It was the beginning of a new understanding, a new balance. 1 year later. The gallery was packed, a low hum of conversation filling the air with the scent of wine and perfume. On the walls hung a series of photographs, each one a stunning black and white study of Seattle. But these weren't the typical iconic shots. They were intimate, visceral, and deeply emotional. A close-up of rain on a cobblestone, a blur of motion from a ferry railing, the intricate ironwork of a spiral staircase seen from below, the powerful, joyful silhouette of a woman dancing against a backdrop of city lights. It was Elara's first solo exhibition. She called it the city's breath. She stood near the entrance, her hand tucked into Ben's, her hair now a chic, short style she no longer felt the need to hide. Leo was across the room, proudly explaining a particular photograph to a group of his colleagues. An older woman approached Elara, her eyes moist. "These are extraordinary," she said. "They don't just show the city, they make you feel it. The joy, the freedom, the life." "Thank you," Elara said, her heart full. Later, as the crowd began to thin, Ben pulled her into a quiet corner. He took a small velvet box from his pocket. "I had a whole speech prepared," he said, his voice a little rough with emotion, "about second chances and bucket lists and how you are the greatest adventure of my life." He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant diamond ring. "But all I really want to say is, Elara, will you add one more item to our list? Will you marry me?" Tears of pure, unadulterated joy streamed down her face. She looked from his hopeful, loving face to the photographs on the wall, a testament to her journey back to life, a journey he had walked every step of the way. "Yes," she whispered, throwing her arms around his neck. 1,000 times yes." As he slipped the ring on her finger, she looked over his shoulder at the final photograph in the series. It was a self-portrait, taken in the reflection of her apartment window. It showed her, strong and clear-eyed, with the vibrant, breathing, magnificent city glowing behind her. It was a picture of a woman who had been to the edge and back, and had learned, finally, how to truly live. The list was complete, but the story was just beginning.